Thanks, ladies. Now, after 6 decades of fearless investigative reporting, this award-winning journalist continues to tackle some of our country's most challenging headlines, including the secret world of unwanted and neglected children adopted into American homes. Please help me welcome legendary journalist Dan Rather to Emotional Mojo. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you very much. Glad to be with you.
This is an amazing topic. Now, according to experts, approximately 250,000 children have been adopted into the U.S. over the past 15 years, and 10% of these adoptions end in failure. Now, why is this topic so important to you?
Well, because I think it's something most people don't know. While most adoptions, both those in this country and adopting children overseas, go reasonably well, hundreds, perhaps thousands of children adopted from overseas, places like Ethiopia, for example, are brought to this country, and then their adoptive parents decide they can't handle them. And what happens with too many of them, they're advertised on the internet. They're, quote, dehomed. And the adoptive parents say, anybody want this child? This is outrageous. We're not the kind of people who do this, because obviously there's no meaningful federal regulation of this. Most states have no regulation of it. The adoption agencies that are responsible for arranging the international adoptions frequently just stand clear of it. And what's needed here is, first of all, attention to the fact that there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of these cases where these children are brought from overseas here. And increasingly, by the way, more than 50% of the international adoptions now, it's estimated, involve children over the age of 3. And older children, anybody who knows anything about adoption knows older children present much greater challenges, especially when they come from some country overseas where they perhaps have been traumatized for one reason or not. But what's needed here, first of all, there needs to be some meaningful government involvement in this. These children become citizens of this country immediately once they arrive. They're citizens, and they have the same rights as biological children. It isn't illegal under current conditions for adoptive parents to throw up their hands and say, I can't handle this child, go to the internet and say, anybody want this child. It isn't illegal, but in my opinion, it is unconscionable.
Dan, that's amazing information. Now, in your newest 2-hour special, Unwanted in America, the shameful side of international adoption, you investigate issues surrounding this international adoption issue. So let's take a look.
After Addie had been a part of their family for 2 years, Kayla and Kurt suddenly announced she would be visiting a friend of theirs in Wisconsin.
Addie, pack your stuff. I'm gonna take you to Wisconsin. I was like, what? Why? I'm gonna take you to somebody's house and they have a lot of Ethiopian kids. And I said, how long? And he's like, it's for a week.
But it wasn't for a week. Addie's adoptive parents were about to make a decision that families were making all over the country.
So parents all over the country were suddenly changing their minds. Dan, what happened?
Well, what happens, the children become especially vulnerable. In some cases, this, quote, dehoming works out, a new adoptive home works out, and in many cases, it doesn't work out. One of the problems is that nobody tracks these children, and in many cases, we don't know what happens. The children just sort of, if you will, disappear into a void on the internet, and that's the central problem. That putting children, advertising children up on the internet, anybody want this child, anybody willing to adopt this child, we aren't the kind of people that allow this sort of thing to happen in our country. And one of the big problems, by the way, is nobody really knows what happens to many of these children. I want to emphasize that a lot of international adoptions, most international adoptions go at least reasonably well. What we're talking about here is roughly maybe 10% of the adoptions, but that's hundreds, perhaps thousands of children who are involved in this.
Dan, thank you so much. This is so important. You can watch Dan Rather Presents Unwanted in America, the shameful side of international adoption on Access TV, December 4th and 6th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.